Thank you so much. I'm John. It's always, it's just awesome to get to come and talk to groups like this. I am from Seattle. I had self-quarantined myself over in the corner, but I was pulled here in the middle and everything. So it is interesting times out there. So I was at Amazon a long time ago. I was at Amazon from early 2002 through late 2005. I got to run two businesses. I launched the marketplace business, so third-party selling at Amazon.com. Today, that's over 58% of all units shipped and sold. Over 3 million sellers on that platform, and I ran enterprise services. We ran other large retailers, e-commerce infrastructure for them, so I was responsible for Target.com, Toys R Us, Marks & Spencer, and a number of other great brands. And I wanted to talk today about just a couple of the things that I came away with from an incredible experience at Amazon. I did leave in late 2005. I was a partner in a consulting firm after that. I started to put in place like all the little mechanisms and strategies of how we got things done at Amazon. It was at one of my clients at the Gates Foundation who pulled me aside one time and said, John, you know, you really ought to write a book about that. And I said, Greg, I'm an engineer. I can barely do PowerPoint. But I was fortunate to talk him into being my partner on the books. But maybe that's the first lesson from Amazon. Amazon has 14 leadership principles. Customer obsession is the most famous, is the first, but it's just one of 14. When I was at Amazon, they weren't codified, they weren't written down, but we were practicing them every day. And we would always take the time to not only we're making a decision, we're using data, we're thinking about a particular circumstance, but we'd always sit back and go, well, how would that situation reflect in other moments, in other situations? Like, what's the underlying principle that we're using? And it was some years after I left Amazon that they codified the 14 leadership principles. But one of the things, in a company that was so busy, that was hard to believe at that point, struggling for our survival in 2002, we always treasured and our brand and our culture and our business, and we were never willing to compromise the future for making short-term business decisions or compromises. And we were always thinking about, why are we making this decision? And that's what has led to the 14 leadership principles. And I truly believe, although it's a big company today, it's not perfect in any way, but it does operate still today with a speed and an agility and an accountability level that you don't see most other organizations operate at. And it's because they are deliberate in not just how they think, but like, what are the underlying principles that we believe in, and they inculcate that into their culture, and so that everybody absorbs it, and so that people can operate more independently without bringing everything to center, helping to avoid what is truly Jeff's biggest concern for Amazon, which is not government interference, which is not competition. It's about Amazon becoming a bureaucracy, about slowing down, about losing accountability, and stopping to have fun. So that's the first lesson. As I mentioned, the first leadership principle is customer obsession. One of the curious things is, you know, they use that word, they could have used an easier word, right? Like, we're customer focused, we're in touch with our customers. But instead, we talked about that we picked a very pungent word, a very smelly word, right? You know when you're around somebody who's obsessed about something, right? And so when you're around somebody who's obsessed with a sports team or something like that, how do they appear to you? It's weird, right? Disoriented. They spend time, attention, resources in ways that you do not understand. Like, it's really odd when you're around somebody who's obsessed with something. And that is exactly why Amazon uses that word when they talk about customers, because they are willing to be misunderstood, oftentimes for long periods of time, in order to do what they believe is right for their customers and for the business over a long period of time. And so one of the mindsets we always took, which is, we are responsible for the customer experience far broader and far deeper than the product or service that we were directly accountable for, right? And so in the marketplace business, really all we were accountable for was discovery, helping customers find items, buying, payments, and third parties were responsible for everything else, from delivery of those products to customer service to customer returns to anything else. But instead, we took a very different approach. We said, we are responsible, that customer trust was the most important brand element that we had, that we needed to make buying from Amazon as trusted as, from buying from a third party as trusted as buying from Amazon third-party seller. So we put in place controls and data and choreography that made it really complex to be a third-party seller, but gave us the insights to be able to deliver to that customer trust. And so think about the broad customer experience and where can you find ways to understand, have data, have metrics, have understandings, and influence that customer experience much broader than just what your product or your service does today. It's that mindset. So when I was at Amazon, 90% of the book business, listen to this, 90% of the business was selling books, music, video. 90% was books, music, video. Think about the conglomerate business that Amazon is today. And it's that mindset of exploring the customer experience is largely responsible for Amazon exploring into new businesses. I get asked a lot like, John, what was it really like working at Amazon? And there's lots of ways that I can reflect back on that, some high points, some low points I'll talk about. But the thing that I come away with mostly was, it is a culture of metrics. When you are in corporate, the everyday rhythm of the business was this thing called metrics meetings, right? So on Monday, it'd be the small teams. By Friday, it would be the worldwide meetings. And guess what? Back on Monday, you go back to that same set of meetings. Metrics meetings brought together typically a consistent set of people to digest a set of metrics about the business, about the customer experience, about operations. A couple of key lessons to take from this. First is, we always spent more time talking about how are we going to measure something broader than just our product and service, right? How are we going to measure something as much as we did what was the actual product or the service, right? We spent more time debating the metrics as the design of the product or service, because we knew no matter how good the product or service was that we went out with, it wasn't going to be right. It wasn't going to be perfect. It wasn't going to be done. But if we instrumented the experience correctly, then the teams had the fuel, had the data in order to iterate towards perfection, right? So spend more time on your metrics. Secondly, your metrics are never done, right? So every time you're getting together to talk about an issue, an incident, something that happened, you always need to sit back and reflect. And it's like, did we have the right metrics for all of that? You always need to be deepening your metrics and designing your metrics. When I work with clients on metrics, they always have this mindset of like, I want a green, yellow, red indicator. And secondly, we've got 2 weeks and then our metrics are done, right? And it's like, whoa. We don't even start with that. Like, your metrics are never done. And finally, I always like to talk about metrics are a verb, right? Like, they're not a thing, they're a verb. They're about action and insight. Every metric at Amazon has a name by it, right? That person never owns all the operational or organizational things that it takes to influence that metric, right? A person owns that metric, and the culture, the name of the game is, when somebody comes to talk to me about a metric that they own, guess what? We all work for that person, right? We all work for that person because they're working towards an outcome, not an organizational structure, not a seniority, not a position. We work for outcomes, and our metrics are the best indicator of what those outcomes are in our pursuit of perfection. Which finally gets to, again, helping to avoid the organization structure, names, titles, seniority, things that don't matter to customers and outcomes. What matters is, how are you performing today? So I got to travel a bit with Bezos relative to when we were in the enterprise business, and I remember a discussion he was asked once, like, well, how does Amazon decide what to innovate on and everything? He goes, well, that's a really tough, good question, but he goes, at the end of the day, I like to think about durable customer needs. And if you can understand your durable customer needs, those things that won't change over time, that can give you good kind of swim lanes in which you think about, where do we invest, where do we innovate? And he goes, I believe in 3 durable customer needs. And he's thinking about his retail business at this point, right? He goes, I believe in 3 things. First is, a customer will never want a higher price. Second, a customer will never want less selection. They'll never want fewer choices. And third is a customer will never want slower delivery. And so I believe that those are the three durable customer needs that I'm going to continue to invest in. And if you think about the history of Amazon over the past 25 years relative to the retail business, you see them like they kind of stick in those three swim lanes, right? How to lower prices, how to add more selection, and how to make delivery and service more flexible, and they continue to keep in those. So if you can decide what are our durable customer needs and use those as swim lanes, as guidelines to help try new things, even when those things don't pan out, guess what? They are aligned to your durable customer needs, and you're going to learn better from them. Amazon is a culture of writing, right? And so all ideas, all proposals get thoroughly written out and debated before we proceed on them. And that's one of the reasons why I think Amazon, they make very good and deliberate decisions at the senior level. We're doing this, we're not doing that, right? The strategy is the deliberate process of what you say yes to, and more importantly, the things you say no to. Because there's always more smart things that you can do than you can possibly afford to do. And I believe that diluting the couple of things that you intentionally decide to do with proceeding on things that you didn't deliberately say no to is one of the leakages, one of the dilution factors that happens in most organizations. And the second aspect of writing out ideas fully in narratives, in future press releases, in FAQs, in user manuals, before you build anything is that teams make better decisions. They have clarity. Clarity is both simplicity and completeness of thought. And when you get to clarity, then you can better decide, well, what's the most important hypothesis? How do we test on it? How do we proceed on it? How do we build just the minimally viable thing that we need to test out next? And so it is definitely a go slow to go fast approach of writing out ideas, but it's why I think a company like Amazon then proceeds on the execution and testing path so well is because they've done the hard work of thinking about it and as teams getting together and exactly understanding what it is we're deciding to do, what we're saying yes and no to, and how to proceed on our testing and development around that. So everybody here has heard of AWS, right? Amazon Web Services, big cloud leader, right? So in holiday 2003, we had a really rough holiday season. The website kept tipping over. We couldn't handle the traffic and domain. At that time, all teams owned their own infrastructure, right? So you owned server forecasting, server provisioning, server operations, all of those things. And we came back from holiday 2003. We were like, this isn't working out. And so we decided to centralize infrastructure, right? And infrastructure teams work great. We'll provide you interfaces so that you can self-service and manage your server provisioning, operations, and things like that. And what we decided was, that is great, but here's the problem with just having internal customers. We all want to get along, right? We're all friends, we're all colleagues. We're going to externalize it. We're going to have external customers, because external customers are always discontent, right? External customers are more demanding. And we stumbled into this incredible business that is now AWS. So think about, what are your core capabilities, the things that you absolutely need to be world-class at? And ask yourself, what would it take in order to create a service that is self-service, that others could use without having to come and talk to me, that I could offer competitive features, competitive rates, competitive SLAs, right, service level agreements on. And even if you decide not to proceed on that platform strategy, what you'll do is you'll come up with a set of ideas and feedback about how do we take what we think, what we perceive to be our world-class capabilities and actually make them better. And that is where, again, so many of Amazon's ideas have come from, is thinking about what are the things we need to be world-class at. How do we build tools for ourselves, but we're going to externalize them, partially because there's a business opportunity there, yes, but also it makes the service and makes the capability better. So Amazon deeply believes in entrepreneurships. Again, the biggest concern, the biggest paranoia at Amazon is becoming a bureaucracy. And so what they believe in small teams, right? And so these small teams, not every team is organized in this way, but one type of small team at Amazon is called a two-pizza team. A two-pizza team, a team no bigger than 10. The ideal size of a two-pizza team is one person. A two-pizza team owns a core service. It could be something that is on the website, like the image service or the payment service or the promotion service, or it could be a core back office capability, right? Like item forecasting, inventory receive, capabilities that you have to be world-class at. That small teams owns that product and that service. So they own product definition, product management, execution of it, gaining adoption both internally and externally. They have daily metrics, they have long-term metrics, and as soon as that service becomes kind of too big, too broad, guess what they do? They do the opposite of what every other team does, which is instead of rolling things up, they break things down. They'll split it into two teams, right? So there's separate services. And so that idea of creating essentially Lego blocks out of your business capabilities so that A, they can be owned by a team, a leader over a longer period of time. B, they can have a better sense of ownership. They can obsess about that capability, and they can have long-term ownership of it versus kind of this project launch and leave mentality that is part of the challenge when we're always trying to create change. So that's the two-pizza team model. So one of the great lectures I got from Jeff was in a big setting. We were launching the marketplace business, and he started to talk to me about like, well, how many new categories, how many new merchants have we launched? And I began to explain. I was like, well, Jeff, I only own kind of the merchant integration component of that. And Jeff said, John, I want you to listen to me carefully. John, you have allowed the simple things in our business to become the hard things in our business. Hard things should be hard, right? But you have to have wisdom. You have to recognize what hard things are, right? Simple things like the constraints that you're talking about, I expect you to think bigger than just your job title. I want you to think about running the marketplace business while also understanding you have a specific responsibility of merchant integration. And I think that mindset of having the wisdom to understand what are truly hard things in the business versus what are the things that really should be simple, and figuring out ways of pushing through those things that should be simple. So I have a client right now. We're working on kind of an innovation pipeline and portfolio, and we're at the point where we need to now be staffing some teams for some of the products and services that we want to be building. We're going to be doing it with some contingency and consulting labor, and we are being challenged with legal, with compliance, with procurement, with all of these things. And I keep telling them, if we get pulled to the board in a year and we're asked, why did we fail at kind of our innovation process? And we have to talk about like, well, because we couldn't hire the contingent capability we needed quickly enough, we should be fired because we have allowed the simple things in our business to become the hard things. So I want to wrap up. There's lots of ways to sum up. But I think, Amazon is a special place. And I think one of the reasons why it's a special place is, there are 14 leadership principles. They're not a poster, right? Everybody uses them every day to help make better decisions, to hire talent better, to create this culture. And so I would just encourage you to continue to challenge yourselves about how do we create consistency in how we think, how we make decisions, what is our culture, and be willing to let your culture not just attract the right talent, but to repel the wrong talent. And I know that somebody might be offended by that concept, but culture should be smelly, they should be strong, they should be definable. It shouldn't be for everybody. And so think about how do you use your concepts of principles to create a culture that helps you fulfill your mission. So I want to say thank you for being invited here. I hope I've given you some insights from the lessons I've learned in launching the Amazon Marketplace.